Hello, Star Trek fans. Welcome to ReBinge It. This is the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast. My name is Kim.
And my name is James.
And we are rebinging Star Trek Voyager from the beginning, one episode at a time. Welcome back to the podcast. Today we are on Season 2, episode lucky number 13, Prototype. This episode aired January 15th, 1996. Before we talk about this one, anything to say about last week's episode, which was Resistance?
Is not futile.
Yes, it proved to not be futile. And this was the episode with Joel Grey, where we were down on a planet trying to buy something and ended up in jail.
We talked a little more about the episode after we recorded the podcast, and it really was kind of funny how the soldiers or the thugs of the regime were really not very well invested. They really did seem to be kind of the F troop. It was bizarrely funny.
Yeah, at their first opportunity, they were out of there.
Yeah. These people are weird. I'm leaving.
See you later. Yeah, these people are so weird. I'm out of here. Well, should we talk about this one?
An episode with sentient robots? Absolutely. The only thing missing was time travel.
I do think the sort of funny thing they do at the beginning with the black and white and the staticky screen, that's something that really feels like Voyager. It doesn't feel like any of the other shows.
Yeah.
Well, I have the notes this week.
You certainly do.
Off we go. In the cold open, we appear to be getting the perspective of someone or something floating in space as Voyager approaches. The picture is black and white and all staticky, and it keeps breaking up. And then we are beamed away and end up on Voyager with B'Elanna and Tuvok and Janeway looking very closely at us.
Yep.
B'Elanna says it's extraordinary, and Tuvok reminds her it could be a potential security risk.
Tuvok the downer.
B'Elanna is worried that it's losing power. Tuvok would rather we just let it lose power and look at it after.
Yeah, it's much safer to look at something unknown after it's dead.
Yeah, I don't disagree. But because it is an unfamiliar power source and something completely new, Janeway reminds Tuvok that this is a ship of exploration, and she agrees with B'Elanna.
And don't be a downer.
The picture continues to be black and white and break up as we go to engineering now, with B'Elanna and Harry trying to stabilize it, whatever it is.
Yep.
Harry suggests an interface with the UPS conduit, which does seem to help. And now we see the it that they're talking about, because our perspective seems to shift and look over at a screen in engineering, and we're able to see an image of ourselves at this point.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's a silver robot lying on a table. And we cue the theme song.
This was so reminiscent of RoboCop, which, God, was like 10 years before this.
Mm-hmm.
The part of it where they're actually constructing RoboCop, and you see it as a series of, or montage of grainy TV pictures of various things happening. And this was very reminiscent of that.
Mm-hmm.
It was a very compact opening that jumps you straight into a story of there's a silver robot lying on a table in engineering.
So in RoboCop, it was the same thing, like you were from the perspective of the person?
There's a scene where they're building RoboCop, and you see it from his perspective of like little snippets.
Oh, okay. So yeah, this is very similar. I did think when the robot sees the image of itself, what's funny is they've got it's got a shirt on and it's all open. Like, they've opened the shirt on somebody and they're trying to give them CPR or something. I don't know. I thought that was funny.
I think this as well is almost a throwback to like Metropolis, the original black and white movie. And some of those maybe 1950s, some of the more schlocky robot movies where it was a guy with a silver head on. I
mean, we could overanalyze it too and think about they're trying to help us to see that this robot doesn't see the world for what it is. It sees it in a very black and white way.
Oh.
Which becomes true later when how it makes decisions.
Okay. That's a really unique take. I didn't think about that, but that's, maybe that is some subtle messaging.
Maybe.
This robot does see things just in black and white.
Yeah, it could be. Well, after the credits, we are finally back in normal video, which is a relief because all that flashing was getting annoying.
Yeah, I wonder how many people tried to adjust their TV set.
Well, I did read, I think it was on Memory Alpha, where when they sent this out, they had to send a message too to say, that first part, that's how it's supposed to be. There's not something wrong with it, which is quite funny. Because in the old days, televisions would do stuff like that all the time.
Yep.
Harry is now scanning the it that we keep talking about and says it's not a cyborg, it's completely robotic. B'Elanna identifies the energy module, which is running on some kind of superconducting plasma. It's all new and very exciting for her. After they seem to stabilize the power loss, the robot starts kind of stuttering and saying, "Prailer, Prailer," but nothing else.
I would think at this point they should be worried it starts saying self-destruct in 3, 2.
Yeah. Yeah, where's Tuvok at this point? He ought to be keeping an eye on this.
Yeah.
B'Elanna is sure it's trying to talk to them, but Harry is like, he can't even see us. And he's like waving his hands in front of the robot face. It's pretty funny.
They are trying to show that B'Elanna is already strangely connected to this machine. She seems very concerned about it.
Well, I read too, again, this might have been a Memory Alpha. I don't know. I read a bunch of different things about this episode, but they were sort of leaning into this thing that B'Elanna was like the mother in this scenario.
Yeah.
You know, so she was having sort of motherly reactions. And I'm going to talk about this later, but I actually find that kind of annoying because when I watched it through the first time without having read anything, I just was thinking she was looking at it like an engineer, which is a problem she wanted to solve. And we all have become obsessed with some problem, you know, that nobody else really cares about. So that's the way I looked at it. So sort of from my mind, that's something that is written from the point of view from someone who's never thought that way before.
Yeah.
But I thought that was too narrow.
That's interesting because I saw it as B'Elanna obsessing about an engineering problem. I mean, we're both from an engineering background and we are both very aware of what dealing with something that like this is like, that you've got an issue you want to fix and you are going to die on that hill to fix it.
Yeah, and you will stay up all night like a crazy person until it's fixed. Yeah, absolutely. And that was the way I was looking at this. Yeah. It's getting late and Harry wants to go to bed and look at it more tomorrow. They sort of joke around with each other for a bit as she calls him Starfleet and he calls her Lieutenant. And it's a cute moment between them.
That was good.
I quite like that.
I did like the way he sort of mockingly says, "Yes, Lieutenant."
Yeah.
After she threatens to pull rank on him. So
yeah.
I think this was a good example of that solid working relationship that B'Elanna and Harry have.
Oh, totally.
And displaying that there's very obviously a friendship there. I mean, she wasn't really ordering him.
Right.
This reminds me of the Deep Space Nine episode, The Ship, where Miles's engineer, who's working with him, keeps on calling Miles Sir.
Oh,
just because it annoys him because he likes to be called Chief. And it seems like that sort of, solid working relationship. It seems real.
Later, B'Elanna is recording a log saying she's tried 13 methods to reinitialize the robot's power source, but nothing has worked. She's sitting in the dark, empty mess hall now, asking Neelix for more coffee, but he says 2 pots is the limit. And when he asks how her project is going,
Who are you, the barman?
She says she's frustrated and doesn't know how to save the robot. Neelix tells a story about him being stuck on something he was trying to solve and how the answer didn't come to him until he got some sleep. B'Elanna seems to take the hint and gathers up all of her data pads and leaves, but she goes to engineering instead of to bed. She knocks on the robot's head and says, "Anybody home?" I thought that was funny.
A little bit dangerous there, B'Elanna. That might actually trigger the self-destruct. I am under attack.
Right. B'Elanna finally does decide to go to bed, but as soon as she gets in bed, she jumps up and runs from her quarters, still in her jammies. By the way, this bed that she's in looks way better than those Deep Space Nine beds where they had the one awkward pillow. She's actually got a couple of pillows. It looks comfortable.
Well, Voyager is obviously a luxury ship.
By comparison to the station, yeah. She doesn't go to engineering, though. She goes to sickbay, where the doctor points out that she's not in uniform. He also says he's a doctor, not an engineer. But she talks to him about the energy source and the decaying plasma, and the doctor says it sounds like diseased blood and the robot might need a transfusion. B'Elanna starts by saying we don't have the same substance, but eventually she comes up with some technobabble plan where she can use the warp plasma with some modifications, and she runs off.
The doctor's a very useful person to bounce ideas from.
Yeah. She does seem to do that when she wants somebody to brainstorm with, and somebody she maybe doesn't have to say thank you to because she just runs out.
Oh, that's true, yeah. I'm thinking, this does raise a question. So even when they're not on duty, and maybe they're having time off, they still stay in uniform?
Yeah, always. The only time we've seen people on the ship not in uniform when they're on the ship is when they were playing hoverball. Remember?
Oh, that's right, yeah. And Chakotay was wearing his medieval smock.
Exactly.
Oh, because you could go straight from that to the Ren Fair program in the holiday.
I'm guessing we just don't want to deal with a whole other set of clothes, Because, yeah, you would think they would only have the uniforms on when they were on duty, and they're not on duty 24 hours a day.
There's probably a lot of good production reasons for that. Like, you don't have to worry about consistency if you're filming across multiple days.
True.
Even after meal breaks or whatever. You can imagine the editing being, his jacket's on, his jacket's off.
Yeah.
Which has happened with Gowron before in Deep Space Nine. They would cut to a different angle, and where's the jacket gone?
Right. I do remember that.
I can't remember which episode, but I know I pointed it out.
Now B'Elanna, Harry, and Janeway have the robot hooked up to something, and they start infusing the warp plasma. Lots of engineering technobabble, including the use of the word capacitance, which I had not heard it used that way before. Eventually, all their efforts work, and the robot wakes up and grabs B'Elanna's arm, saying, "Please identify yourself." And then, after she says who she is, the robot says, "I'm Automated Unit 3947. And this makes everybody smile. But I'm like, let's not get ahead of ourselves, because this is also really creepy.
I think part of the thing that really works with this automaton is the fact that it has such a pleasant voice.
Yeah, it's very even.
Yes, it's very even. It's very calm, and it doesn't sort of fit with how the robot looks.
Yeah. In another log, B'Elanna says she's learned more about robotics repairing this robot than she could ever have learned at Starfleet Academy.
Dig at Starfleet Academy there.
Well, on the job, you do learn a lot more, too. That's true.
Plus, Starfleet can't even effectively copy data.
Right. They're a little bit like the robots on that one.
Oh, that's a very good point.
The robot says he is currently functioning at 68% of peak operating capabilities. B'Elanna says he's an extremely well-designed machine, and the robot says she's an extremely proficient humanoid. This is, again, a little creepy. And it's like they do...
That's a good compliment from a robot. It's like Tuvok saying, "I find you adequate."
They make it seem like B'Elanna, though, is responding to the interactions and the compliments, more than to the achievement, and I don't buy it. This guy in the robot suit, he can't possibly see anything.
Oh, that's a good question.
Well, I read that there were little slits in the mask, but that the actor still couldn't see anything, and they had to keep trying to make sure that those slits weren't visible. So it's funny they were there if they weren't really doing any good.
Well, it could be like the whole thing with Morn, where we saw several times.
Right.
You could see Morn being, gently ushered in a particular direction by a bystander.
Yeah, because the robot definitely does not move around too much on its own.
Yeah.
This episode was directed by Jonathan Frakes, though, by the way. I think this is the last of the Voyager episodes he directs.
Oh, big fan of his directing.
B'Elanna asks how the robot ended up floating in space, and it says it was operating an asteroid mining pod that exploded. I think I'm going to call it he instead of it because the voice is male anyway, or at least the actor inside is male.
Yeah.
And it's hard to keep saying it. So he says he was stationed aboard a Praelar vessel, but he can't remember much else. B'Elanna thinks the memory loss is temporary.
Now, question here. Was the robot lying, or is it being genuine? Is it not telling the full story?
I think the robot was being honest.
Yeah.
Because he said he was at 68%, right? So maybe he really couldn't remember things yet.
Okay.
I don't think he'd lied to us at all, really.
Okay, let's discuss this in over-analysis.
All right. B'Elanna explains that she adapted their warp plasma for him, which surprises him, and he says, "Are you a builder?" She says she's an engineer, and he says only the builders could construct or repair power modules. The builders were humanoids like B'Elanna. He says you could create a new power module, a prototype for the construction of additional automated units. And he also tells her that the builders that built him no longer exist, which is a red flag.
I think if you find a robot or any kind of automated device and it says, "Oh, my creators are all dead," the very next question should be, and how did that happen?
Yes.
What are the exact details?
Yes, were you involved in that?
Maybe I'm misinterpreting it. The robot isn't necessarily lying. It's just not being forthcoming with all the facts.
Yeah, but it's also not a social creature, so it's just answering the question that's being asked. Like if you wrote a computer program, and you built in the questions. If the question's not there, you wouldn't know how to answer it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Before machine learning.
So really, it's just providing basic information. It's
Correct.
It's not prepared, or it's not programmed to give you an in-depth analysis of your question and all the possible...
It's not programmed to have a conversation.
Yeah.
Now B'Elanna goes to Janeway to plead her case. She says thousands of the robots were built as service modules, but the builders all died out in a war decades ago. The robots have been fending for themselves, but they're unable to construct new power modules. She says it's an incredible challenge, but with enough time, she thinks she could do it. Janeway doesn't doubt B'Elanna's abilities, but helping them reproduce is a clear violation of the Prime Directive. And besides, we don't like them, so we're not going to break the rules for them. B'Elanna thinks they have the right to reproduce, but Janeway points out they weren't designed to reproduce, so we'd be giving them new abilities, which is the equivalent of altering their genetic structure.
Yeah.
B'Elanna continues to plead her case because she wants to stop them from becoming extinct, but Janeway says, we don't know that's what will happen. But either way, sometimes that's just part of normal evolution. Janeway feels for them, but she says, what you're proposing is exactly what the Prime Directive prohibits. We also don't know the consequences of our actions.
Yes.
She says she admires B'Elanna's compassion, but the answer is no.
Very forcefully no as well.
Indeed.
Before we leave the scene, I think this might be the very definition of a difficult conversation.
Yes, and I do have this conversation in Janeway's leadership corner, because I think it's a pretty good conversation.
Yeah. I think this scene here really does kind of underline the purpose of the Prime Directive. We kind of poke fun at it, but this one actually is a really good example of where if you break the Prime Directive, if you help these robots reproduce, the consequences could be enormous.
Well, especially...
They weren't designed to, produce more units. Maybe it would affect the balance of power in the sector. you don't know what the ramifications are. But at the same time, if in 100 years the robots manage to figure out how to make more of themselves, that's fair enough. That's just what happens. So I think Janeway's take here is not only a good story point, but I think it's actually spelling out a good example of where the Prime Directive actually works.
Yeah, I agree. Because there are many times where they throw the Prime Directive around and we're like, oh my God. Yeah. But I do think it makes sense here, especially at this point that we're at where we've met exactly one of these robots.
Yes.
We don't know anything else. You know, we learn a little bit later, but even at that point, we don't necessarily know enough to be interfering like this.
Yeah. And I do find it odd that nobody, especially not even Tuvok, would ask, so exactly what happened in this war?
Yeah. Without asking any questions. Yeah. Although I guess you couldn't necessarily trust what it told you either.
Yeah. What were you designed for? What were you designed to do?
I mean, exactly. We haven't really asked enough questions.
Yeah.
And we're just taking the robot's word for it.
And I'm just going to warn you, this isn't my last Prime Directive point.
Okay. B'Elanna now explains Janeway's position to the robot, who does not agree with this, of course.
I would find it difficult, being in the robot's perspective, to agree with it.
Yeah. She admits that she'd like to try and help, but she can't. He says, without your help, we will not survive. And then he does some robot guilt by saying, I thought Lieutenant B'Elanna Torres was a builder. She tells him they've located a ship and will be within comms range soon.
Was the robot actually manipulating her? Is that
I don't know.
Part of the skills the robot have? Or was he just, like you said, stating just plain facts?
I think he was just stating a fact. Like, you can't help, I thought you could. Although then, why does he kidnap her?
I think there's more depths to this robot than
I think so.
Than he's letting on.
I think so.
I'm leaning towards that was a deliberate plea to emotion.
Yeah.
I mean, the robot may not have emotion, but it may understand it with humanoid life forms.
Yeah, I think we get some clues that they do understand a little bit, that the humanoids, at least, were a little bit more unpredictable in their methods.
Yeah.
On the bridge, we meet up with the robot ship, or the Praetor vessel, and when we put them on screen, we see another robot that looks exactly like the one we have, but this one has a different number.
And it doesn't have a dent in its forehead.
No, it doesn't. Robot number 2, I'll call this guy. He thanks them for finding their missing unit and signs off without any chatting or pleasantries.
He is very polite, though.
He's very polite. Yes, Tom points that out.
And he has the same kind of very pleasant speaking voice and demeanor.
Yes. Down in the transporter room now, B'Elanna is giving robot number 1 some extra warp plasma in case the plasma they infused into its system starts to degrade.
Oh, giving him a to-go cup.
Yeah, it is like a mom giving a kid a thermos. I mean, it's what it looks like. The robot says thank you, and B'Elanna says goodbye, shaking his hand. But then he zaps B'Elanna somehow, and he holds up his other hand, sending an energy charge at the transporter dude, knocking him out. That was uncalled for. That guy was just an innocent extra.
Yeah, he didn't even get a line.
No, he just got zapped. Harry now notices from the bridge that there's been an energy discharge in the transporter room. Yeah. And of course, nobody answers when Janeway calls. And the robot manages to initiate a transport somehow and takes an unconscious B'Elanna with him.
Once again, you have this unknown device on board your ship that turns out to be a sentient robot. And you don't have a security team following it around.
No security team, exactly.
This is Deep Space Nine levels of security.
Tuvok points out that things might be a security risk, but then he disappears for the rest of the episode. It's like, come on.
He's Vulcan sulking.
Oh, man.
I'm not going to give you a security team. I'm not going to follow around. I'm going to sit on the bridge and sulk.
Well, after we realize B'Elanna and the robot are gone, Janeway's like, great. At this point, I guess she doesn't necessarily know that B'Elanna didn't go willingly. There was an energy discharge, but I suppose that's how they interpreted it, that she was taken.
Well, there's a dead extra in the transporter room.
I don't think he's dead, but because he zaps B'Elanna later and doesn't kill her.
True.
Yeah.
Nah, he killed this guy.
No. Poor guy. The robot ship now has erected some sort of subspace defense shield around their vessel, so they can't get B'Elanna back. Yep. Janeway calls them, saying, this is an act of aggression, and we will retaliate. The robots don't care. They don't answer. So Voyager powers up their phasers.
What's really disturbing here is they can't actually scan their ship.
Yeah, that is weird.
So they don't really know what they're dealing with.
Well, a subspace defense shield, that's pretty tricky.
Yeah.
On the other ship, B'Elanna wakes up and the robot says, this is where you will assist in the creation of the prototype. B'Elanna resists, of course, and the robot grabs her, saying he doesn't want to harm her. She says, I reactivated you. I helped you. Why are you doing this? And he says, we require additional automated units to prevent our extinction. He says it would be inadvisable for her captain to provoke them. I do feel this is what Tuvok was warning us about, right? Like, he doesn't care about B'Elanna making a plea to him. He's a machine. So he's dangerous.
Yeah, because I think going back to your black and white point, he is simply focused on this task of surviving, of making more automated units. So
right.
B'Elanna is, from his perspective, just a tool.
Over on Voyager, they can't read anything about the other ship, including what their weapon capabilities are. Janeway proposes knocking a hole in their shield, so they start shooting, but the robots do some very quick damage to Voyager when they fire quantum resonance charges.
Yeah, they just start beating up on Voyager immediately.
Yes. Janeway says to load up the torpedoes, although we never get a chance to shoot them because we end up so damaged.
Got to save them, only got 52, I think.
Back on the robot ship, B'Elanna sees Voyager getting beat up, and robot number 1 tells her, our weapons are substantially superior to yours, and your weapons pose no threat to us.
Yep.
Yikes. Voyager then tries to run away, but even propulsion is offline, environmental control systems are failing, everything is going wrong, and we can't even run away.
Even Tom's evasive maneuvers don't seem to help. Although, I think we've seen some of the evasive maneuvers just consist of flying in a straight line.
Right. We should quick look for a moon. Maybe we could hide behind that.
Oh, always a good place to hide.
B'Elanna tells robot number 1 to stop it, but he says, they fired first, and our enemies must be destroyed. Ugh. It's very black and white.
Yep.
He says, you're not my enemy, but your captain is. And B'Elanna finally says she'll do what he wants if they stop shooting at Voyager.
Also an indication that the robots can be selective in what they define as enemy. They are, but you aren't.
Right. B'Elanna calls Voyager to say she's agreed to help them build their prototype. She says if I don't do it, they'll destroy Voyager.
A good motivator.
She says, what choice do I have? And then robot number 1 steps in front of the camera and ends the transmission. It was very dramatic.
Oh, that was a great little piece of directing, of literally getting the robot looming over the front of the screen. The only thing that would have made that better is when the robot was leaning across, if it said in that really pleasant voice, and that's enough.
Thank you. Goodbye. Now they give B'Elanna a bunch of robot parts and tell her to get to work. She can't leave the room. She has limited time. She asks if they've ever tried to build a prototype before, and robot number 1 says they tried but couldn't make the power module work.
Yeah.
Robot number 2 at this point comes in looking for a status report 5 minutes after they started work, like a typical boss. He says,
not a micromanager at all, just wondering how everything's going. It's been like a good 5 minutes now.
That always reminds me of the time several companies ago where I was working on a database that was down and I had all these people in my cubicle. Like, this is not helping. Like, you people need to get out of here. I can work a lot faster without you looking over my shoulder. Robot number 2 says they must complete the prototype within 140 hours because that's when Voyager will be repaired, though the robots do recognize that they're likely to do something sooner to try to rescue B'Elanna, so, they know how to evaluate what's going on with the humanoids. I guess they got used to that.
Well, this robot as well is described as a command unit.
Right.
So you would think it would be able to do tactical analyses.
Yeah, different programming. Mm-hmm.
But maybe is missing the subtleties of how humanoids behave?
Well, it's interesting because while they can't necessarily think critically, they're able to understand their own limitations. So they don't have big egos and think that they're smarter than everybody else. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they sort of adjust because of that. It's like they know just enough and they adapt to that. So they know the humans are going to do something. They're not exactly sure what, but they know that they shouldn't expect them to do what they would do.
Yeah.
I think that's interesting. Whereas many times we have talked about ego problems. This is different. Yeah. They're not letting ego get in the way because they don't have egos.
That raises a question. Maybe these robots are deliberately limited in their thinking abilities.
Oh, I think they are. I think that they were programmed to do very specific things and they stay in their box.
And they're learning because B'Elanna tells us that they were figuring out how to do repairs on themselves and they were learning to become more self-sufficient. Mm-hmm. That maybe that's also the process that they're following here with their ability to make decisions and to predict what their enemies, whoever they define as their enemies, are doing. So you're seeing them struggling down the path of, okay, they're going to do something. The humanoids are unpredictable. We don't know what.
Right.
But strategically, if we go back to our programming, they would try and make a rescue attempt earlier.
Right. At this point, B'Elanna says she doesn't know if what she's attempting is even possible.
Yeah.
Robot number 2 says, do it or die, and leaves.
No pressure. Okay. No pressure.
All right. She does not appreciate that attitude, and she says, I don't need to be threatened. I told you I'd do my best. Robot number 1 believes her, but says the other guy's a command module and just following his programming. Okay.
And he had the micromanaging software upgrade added.
Obviously. Over on Voyager, we're talking about how everything is broken. They need about 6 days to repair everything, which lines up with what the robot said. Janeway, of course, says we can't wait that long. She wants a plan to get B'Elanna off that ship. Tuvok proposes they get the warp drives running then, because if they do get B'Elanna, they want to get away.
Yeah, and you need to get away pretty quick.
Although it seems funny that they know Voyager is faster than them, but they know that in a fight they would win. I don't understand why they don't start leaving, get themselves a 6-day lead.
Oh, I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, to go to your point, maybe they're simply working on their base programming. It will take them 6 days to repair, so they don't need to really do anything for 6 days. Rather than making the leap, if we put 6 days distance between us and them,
right. Maybe they won't find us.
It makes us safer. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So again, there's that hole, if you like, in their programming that they can't make these logical leaps yet.
Okay, yeah. Well, B'Elanna figures out the reason the other prototypes failed. While the parts are all identical, each power module has a slightly different energy signature. So every automated unit has a unique energy code that is not interchangeable and can't be recreated. So the robot says, oh, you failed. But B'Elanna is like, don't give up so easily. She says we just have to design a standardized module that can power any unit.
So the robots have DRM and...
Right. Yes.
And B'Elanna is trying to circumvent it.
Meanwhile, Voyager is analyzing the defenses of the robot ship, and they are quite overmatched.
Maybe you should have done that before you started shooting at them.
Right. Yeah, before they put the shield up, you probably should have done that.
Yeah.
Tom suggests a diversion while they attempt to get B'Elanna back. And I don't know if you saw this, but I, of course, because I can't stand Chakotay, everything he does just riles me up. But in this scene, Chakotay is just a complete jerk to Tom. I don't understand how leadership style of jerk makes any sense.
Yeah.
Janeway gets annoyed. She tells him to figure out the diversion and walks away. She's clearly seeing what I see. But she ought to tell him to get his crap together, because that was really rude.
I think, again, you're seeing the unprofessionalism of Chakotay, of he's letting his personal animosity towards Tom actually get in the way.
Yeah. And how many times has he blamed Janeway for doing that against the Maquis, and then he goes and does the exact same thing? Oh, hypocrites. Maybe that's why I can't stand him. I cannot stand a hypocrite.
Maybe we're looking at this the wrong way. Maybe this was a deliberate choice that Chakotay was the heel of the entire arc of Voyager and you were not supposed to like him.
Then I wish they weren't bringing him back to Prodigy.
He was a jerk to his dad. He's a jerk to the crew. He's a poor leader. This was the point of the character.
Yeah. Well, B'Elanna now wonders if robot number 1 will be the one responsible for assembling the new units. He says he is programmed as a maintenance unit, and while he can follow instructions, he doesn't have her improvisational capabilities. I like that because that is a lot of engineering. It's like cooking. You can get yourself into trouble, but can you get yourself out?
Right.
She asks him how long he's been alive, and he says 1,314,807 hours and 33 minutes.
So that comes out at about 150 years old.
Mm-hmm. He asks if her culture has any artificial life forms and if they're slaves. She says, yes, they do have artificial life forms. Most of them don't have the cognitive abilities of robot number 1. And I thought, you mean the abilities to kidnap her? Because that's pretty much what he did. Anyway, she says they aren't sentient except for one who is treated the same as any human. And she's talking about Data, which was cute. Yep. I guess she forgot about Lore, or maybe she doesn't know about Lore.
They keep that secret. Or before. No, before hadn't been found yet, I don't think. Before appeared in Nemesis, 2002.
So, yeah, we haven't found him yet.
I guess she doesn't know about Data's mom either.
Oh, Data's mom was a robot. Yeah, but, she was still alive.
Oh, that was kept a secret, yeah.
Yeah.
I did like how Robot 3947 said, I would like to be acquainted with this Data. I wonder if that was because it could learn things from Data. It could fill in the gaps because Data is massively improvisational.
Well, he doesn't know that, but yeah. Why did he say that?
Or he just wants to meet one of their robots and teach Data how to be an evil murderer.
Yeah, maybe he thinks, that guy could help us.
Yeah.
Over on Voyager, we're continuing to figure out how to rescue B'Elanna. The warp core will be stabilized in 6 hours. Chakotay suggests using the deflector to project an image of another ship, which is so incredibly dumb. Every time anyone on Star Trek suggests that we do this, I'm like, these ships are not flying around with people looking out the windows. That's not how it works. Oh my God.
Okay, maybe a little defense of the idea here. If they projected an image of a ship, there is the possibility that if they have visual scanning of some kind, that somebody sees it, or some automated system sees the ship. Now, we know that there's stealth, that Klingons and the Romulans have cloaking. Now, perhaps the cloaking can hide all your EM signature, your warp signature, all these things, but it can't hide your visual image. So you see a ship and you go, oh crap, is this some new level of cloak that I literally can't see anything on sensors, but we can see it visually? It would at least cause them to panic, veer off, make some corrective action, because it could be a cloaked ship using some new technique. It's stealthy, but visually it could be spotted.
All right, I'll let you have it.
Oh, thank you.
Tuvok calls now to say he's picking up an unidentified ship on long-range sensors. Uh-oh. Meanwhile, on the robot ship, B'Elanna powers up her new robot baby. And it's a near success as the robot starts to sit up, but then powers back down. And robot number 1 is again like, you failed. But she says she needs to adjust the flux capacitance, and we get the second usage of that word, plus a reference to Back to the Future.
Right. This is going to end up with time travel, and everything's going to go to hell.
Oh, man.
That really made me laugh. I assume that was some kind of movie in-joke.
Yeah, because, boy, when did Back to the Future come out? 1985 was the first one.
1990 was the last one.
So it was well in the lexicon by then.
Oh, yeah.
Eventually, the prototype sits up and says, Unit 0001 is ready to accept programming. And she says, we did it. But she did it completely on her own. It's not a we.
The VCR powered up and it's flashing 12 right
now. Robot number 1 says, I knew this task would not exceed your operating capabilities. I thought that was cute.
That's quite a compliment. So question here.
Yeah.
When she's trying to bring the prototype up and B'Elanna says, I should be able to do it, and robot number 1 says, I believe it will. Is that just speculative encouragement from the robot, or did it know technically more than it was letting on?
Yeah.
Like, does it have part of its programming, which is encouragement, which would seem pretty odd thing to have built into these things? or it learned it from observing B'Elanna.
Well, it could be any of that, or it could just be he has now associated B'Elanna with the builders.
Oh.
So it's like, oh, sure. Should be able to do it.
The builders could do this, therefore B'Elanna can do it. Oh,
exactly.
Okay. Oh, that's a good take. Yeah. Because I wasn't sure whether it had enough skills to be able to analyze the design that B'Elanna had, look at it and go, oh, that'll work. But that doesn't seem like they have really an analytical skills.
No. And I do have a question about that later as well.
Okay.
I did wonder, I think it was 00001, like 4 zeros in front of the one. I wonder what happens if they try to make 10,000 robots.
Oh, yeah, well.
Sounds like a COBOL program. Or again, a Y2K problem. We're going to have 2 number 1s.
Well, they add the 5th digit, it overwrites the stack, and the robot goes haywire.
Everything crashes.
Goes on a killing spree.
Oh, yeah, maybe the 10,000th robot is actually a serial killer. Just starts wiping out the other robots.
Yes.
You can't exist. I can't procreate while you exist. Kill, kill, kill. You are my enemy.
Oh, dear.
This is where the story should have gone. We have all kinds of good ideas.
Yeah.
B'Elanna shakes robot number 1's hand just as this other ship arrives and immediately starts firing at the first robot ship.
No hanging around, just start firing.
And these 2 ships look pretty much exactly the same, except in color. One is a little bit golder in color.
Right. I kind of like the look of the ships.
On Voyager, they detect no organic life on the new ship, which makes Janeway wonder if we've stumbled into the middle of some kind of robotic war.
That, for me, was the line of the episode.
It's a great line. Janeway says to back off as this isn't our fight. The second ship hails them, and these robots are gold-colored instead of silver, but they look pretty much the same otherwise.
Well, Tuvok actually scans the ship and says it's manned by, although shouldn't it be roboted? I mean, they're genderless, really. But anyway, it's crewed by automated units that are practically identical.
Gold robot number 1 says, withdraw from this area immediately. But Janeway says she has a crew member being held hostage on the other ship. So the gold robot dude says, well, stay where you are. Do not interfere. Like you can watch while we blow everything up.
He introduces himself as Kravik Automated Commando 122.
Yes. Everyone agrees this is the diversion they've been waiting for.
Yep.
Janeway tells Harry to get down to engineering and work on the warp engines, and she sends Paris to the shuttle bay because I guess the shuttle can get close enough to beam B'Elanna over or something. I don't know. I think I missed that detail of why we needed a shuttle. But anyway, she sends Paris there, and she tells Chakotay to drive.
Well, Tom was going to get through the shields and then get close enough that he could beam her straight on board.
I can see why they needed a distraction for that, because that was just going to get them all killed.
Yeah.
On the robot ship, B'Elanna is asking what's happening, and robot number 1 says the other ship contains automated personnel units from the Kravik homeworld. She asks why they're attacking, and robot number 1 says they were programmed by their builders to attack us. The Kravik builders and the Prelor builders were enemies, and it turns out the Kravik builders are also extinct. Suspicious. We see Tom and his shuttle flying in close to the robot ship as the battle carries on. He synchronizes his shields to the frequency of the robot ship's shields, but that doesn't quite work, and he bounces off. So then Tuvok suggests that he fly right into where the Kravik ship is shooting. He just needs to avoid getting shot himself.
Yeah, that's great advice when you're not the one in the ship under fire.
Yeah, just fly right in there.
Yeah, don't get shot. It's simple.
In the robot ship, B'Elanna asks the obvious question. If both sides have been annihilated, why continue the war? And he says because all of the automated units were programmed to achieve victory, which sounds very bad.
Yes.
The fresh baby robot keeps asking for new programming during this conversation. I mean, it's not a baby, but you know what I mean.
12, flash, 12, flash.
B'Elanna asks why no one has tried to stop the war, but robot number 1 says, well, the Kravik and the Prelor did call a truce, but when they attempted to stop the fighting, the robots terminated the builders.
Yes.
Uh-oh. Well, B'Elanna finally realizes the problem. Of course, like we did. Oy. At this point, Tom does manage to get his shuttle through the hole in the shields, so he's getting closer. Robot number 1 tells B'Elanna that when the war was ending, the builders no longer needed the robots, so they attempted to terminate the robots. In doing so, they became the enemy, and the robots are programmed to destroy their enemy.
Oh.
Hi, this is the danger.
Yes, this is why you have to be really careful with your base programming. You need a long list of directives with, except if this is the case.
Yes.
Destroy your enemies. Unless they are us.
Yeah, exactly. Like in iRobot.
I feel this is like, again, call back to RoboCop, where it has the 4 directives. And the last hidden directive is you can't act against directors of the company.
Mm.
If these builders had watched RoboCop, they would have known to put that in there.
Right. True. He says, now that B'Elanna has created the prototype, they will soon outnumber the Kravik units, and we will achieve victory.
Yes, I really liked the way it said that. It was sort of almost supremacist.
Well, yeah. You'll have victory until you then decide, oh, now we have to destroy all the humans.
Yeah.
Because we didn't like Janeway.
Janeway is our enemy.
B'Elanna finally realizes the individual energy codes were added by the builders to avoid the exact thing that she just did.
Yes, stop the robots from reproducing.
She says, my God, what have I done?
That was great.
She grabs a device and stabs the new robot, zapping it to death.
Yep.
Robot number 1 shoots her with an energy bolt from his hand again and says, you terminated the prototype. You will build another. But B'Elanna says, never. She says, I'm sorry, as she beams away. Tom says he's got B'Elanna, but she's injured.
Okay, so maybe the transporter guy isn't dead then.
Yeah, exactly. Well, except in this case, he needed her alive because he's like, you're going to build another one. You broke that one. You're going to make another one.
Oh, true. He could have been selective.
Yep. Back on Voyager, B'Elanna and Janeway are drinking the fake Neelix coffee again and reflecting on what happened. Janeway says she knows B'Elanna did what was necessary to save the crew. She said it must have been difficult to destroy what she had created. B'Elanna says it was necessary, but bringing that prototype to life was incredible. The end.
I thought they played the ending a bit too much like, oh, she was bringing something to life, rather than she had a collection of parts. She didn't rebuild its brain or design a new brain for this thing. She developed a power supply without the DRM of the original modules.
Yeah, which was a great achievement in a short amount of time. But she didn't give birth to this.
Right.
This whole mother thing, it's in my head now of how dumb that is.
When you bring that up, it changes what was happening at the ending. I thought the ending was being too emotional.
Agreed. I totally agree.
When what would have worked equally as well is marveling in the engineering achievement of being able to do that. It's still a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I agree. That's one of my overanalysis points. It's like, I really think it was a mistake trying to play up that mother thing of it because they're only doing that because it's a woman.
Right.
And that's obnoxious. You know, it's not like she lost a child. It's just nonsense. She accomplished something within engineering and that accomplishment will live on. It's something she should write a paper about. She should start working on some other projects with that knowledge, you know, with that skill set that she's now developed. Pretending as a baby is dumb.
Yeah. And what do you think the name of that paper would be? Building power units for murderous killer robots?
How to save a race of killer robots.
#1 bestseller.
In less than 6 days.
Yep.
Oh my God. Well, do you have, that's one of my overanalysis points, but do you have any overanalysis?
Yes, I do. First thing, and we kind of touch on this, and the most important one, if you beam on board an unknown robot, the first thing you should do is ask what its primary directive is and what it was built for.
Yes, I thought the same thing. Why didn't we ask it, what is your purpose?
Yes. Do you have any genocidal tendencies?
Have you ever killed a humanoid?
Next thing. So the builders were smart enough to install DRM code in their robot's power supplies. If they were smart enough to do that, why didn't you put a kill code in there? Just like the classic Picard. A1, B1, blow up the ship.
I mean, now we're back to the ego problem.
Really?
I don't know.
In what way?
Well, the humans or the humanoids who built them, they were like, oh, we got control.
Oh.
We'll just make sure they can't make more.
Oh.
But they forgot to say, oh, we also need to put an exploding chip in their head.
Maybe the design was stolen from somewhere else. Because both races who were fighting this war had the same design of robot.
Right.
Effectively.
True. So maybe they didn't come up with it, yeah.
Yeah. It was something either bought from someone else, acquired, stolen. It was a robot they found crashed on a moon and then copied it. So they didn't have the full understanding either.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why the programming was so similar and was also lacking.
Yeah, could be. Or maybe the robots figured out how to turn that off. That's also possible, I suppose.
Oh, wow. Well, we've seen the way they can justify things.
Yeah.
They tried to destroy us, so they became the enemy.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe they actually have something like, well, they're the enemy, and only an enemy would use the shutdown codes, therefore we don't respond to the shutdown code.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. I could see their little logical brains figuring that one out. Next thing, people should really start listening to Tuvok.
That's one of my points, yeah. Maybe we should listen to him a little bit more, because we are not cautious enough.
Exactly.
At the same time, I guess maybe they thought, if they think about the artificial units or the robots that they have, the automated units they have on Earth,
yeah,
the ones that Bailana was talking about that weren't Data,
right?
Those are relatively harmless.
Oh.
They're not making decisions like this. So, maybe they looked at it that way. At the same time, I would argue if they were considering that just one of those sort of harmless robots like they have on Earth, then what would be the point of beaming it over and trying to bring it back to life? There would be no point in it. So, I don't know. There's a lot of contradictions in there.
Okay. I think because both Janeway and B'Elanna are engineers, and you're looking at it as an engineering conundrum.
Yeah, that's true.
So it appeals to both of them, and it particularly appeals to Janeway with an engineering background. As somebody who's repaired a lot of old video games, that is a huge appeal. If you've got something that doesn't work and you're going to go and fix it. So I can really relate to that from Janeway and B'Elanna's perspective.
And they do talk about it being a power source that they'd never seen before. So there was an opportunity to learn about a new power source that they could benefit from.
Yep.
Okay. All right.
Next thing. And this goes back to something you've brought up before. Was that totally reckless, beyond all imagination, to fire on a ship that you have no idea what its capabilities are?
I mean, what's the rule that Savick quotes? The ship approaches, then you don't know what it is. You're supposed to put your shields up.
Oh.
They didn't even do that because she let them scan. Remember? Because she's like, oh, yeah, let them take a look. Yeah, that's a mistake of hubris.
Although that was in the case of a Federation ship that had not responded to hails.
Yeah, I can't remember the exact thing. But it seems like when you are coming in contact with a ship, that especially here in the Delta Quadrant where all the really nasty jerks are, you really ought to have your shields up and you really ought to be prepared that they are going to be unpleasant.
I think that is pretty solid advice.
I think we would be actually way, 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 way more concerned about things like this.
Yeah.
It seems like we've gotten sort of blasé about it. I think we would be the opposite. We would be super paranoid about everything at this point because everything we've run into has tried to kill us.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody has had an agenda of some kind.
Yeah, I don't buy the blasé attitude.
I could see it working in the Alpha Quadrant, where there's a lot of support and there's other stuff.
Yeah, you have backup you can call.
But out here, I think, you'd be circumspect about everything. And I think the last thing you would do would be open fire on a ship where you do not know its capabilities.
Let's shoot at it and see if it can kill us. What a surprise, it can.
Yeah, not a good plan.
And will. No, that's a bad plan.
Next thing, I wonder if the builders put a blind spot into the robots. Because when they were copying the power units and they could do a physical perfect copy, they couldn't see the fact that there was a different energy signature. They had a different code for each unit.
Mm-hmm.
So was this a lack of understanding? Or are these robots hard-coded with a blind spot? I took it as there are things in their base programming, maybe, that they can't see.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Or is it because they're not engineers, so they don't actually even know what to look at?
Oh.
Almost like somebody who could copy something physical by looking at it, but this is something now they have to actually analyze code and figure out what it does. Could be that too, but...
So what they're doing is a piece-for-piece copy without understanding that some parts of it, what they do.
Yeah. But I think what you say makes sense because they don't necessarily want the robots to know that they can't procreate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They built in this safety measure and they don't want them knowing...
Yeah, they don't want them to know.
...what the safety measure is.
Yeah. Yeah, could be.
Next thing. So, a species that can't reproduce. B'Elanna's comment about a biological species had become sterile. If that species is warp capable and has actually reached out to the stars and other planets, shouldn't you help them?
Didn't this happen?
Is that a violation of the Prime Directive?
Wow, I feel like that's happened in a story, but I have to say I can't remember if it was Star Trek or if it was something else.
It might have been in one of the novelizations.
I feel like we've had this conversation, but is it still not a violation of the Prime Directive? I don't know. Does the Prime Directive say that you can't help anyone outside of the Federation? No, doesn't say that.
Yeah.
So it says you can't help them if what? They're...
robots.
No, you can't help them if they're less evolved. That's not true either.
Yeah.
That's why the Prime Directive is dumb.
It makes it almost inconsistent because where do you draw the line on helping people and not helping people?
Yeah,
It would mean a lot of Star Trek episodes would just consist of TNG turning up on a planet and going, yeah, Prime Directive, sorry, can't help.
I mean, we've talked about it before. I do think the Prime Directive doesn't make a lot of sense. Because of this, there are just so many conflicts, inconsistencies.
I think you'd be morally obliged to help, especially if this was a spacefaring race and you had the technology to help them.
I think there are frequently real inconsistencies with the Prime Directive.
Yeah.
And they use it when they need it in the story. Here, it makes sense. It makes sense what Janeway says about it and why she says no. That makes complete sense.
Yeah.
But if it were an actual living race that used to be able to procreate, well, and B'Elanna even asks Janeway about that. And she says, well, maybe, but I'd have to know more about it.
Yeah.
She's like, I can't just make a flat decision.
Do we like them?
Exactly.
Are they annoying?
Are they good looking?
Yeah.
And we like them.
Right.
Then I might help them. It might depend on the circumstances under which that happened.
Yeah.
If it was a normal part of evolution, you might not help them.
Ooh.
But if it was like something that the founders did, right? Like that thing where they caused it so they couldn't really, whatever the bad virus was that they gave the people on that one planet.
It's the kind of thing the founders would do.
Yeah.
And not even think twice about it.
Now it's somebody else interfering in a race's natural evolution. So then they might try to help with that. I suppose if you look at it that way and you just try to say natural evolution, although what at this point is natural, especially in Star Trek.
What happens if the race accidentally caused it themselves?
Yeah, is that natural?
Yeah. Should you help them?
There is no black and white in this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's very much the takeaway from the Prime Directive of it's more of a guideline.
Yeah, and I bet a lot of people listening to this are like yelling at their headphones, giving us their opinion on the Prime Directive. Because we do get emails about the Prime Directive and about what we say about it.
Yeah. And that, I think, actually wraps up my overanalysis, surprisingly.
Okay. I don't have a lot.
I made up for that.
Yeah. I did read some of the criticism of the episode was about the robots being sort of cheesy. And they were concerned about that even in deciding whether or not they should make this episode because they didn't think they could make it look realistic. And then and this episode doesn't have a very good rating, which is also interesting. But yeah, even Frakes was saying, the robots ended up looking a bit cheesy. And instead, the people who made the episode were like, well, but that mother aspect of B'Elanna, that was the really good stuff, right? It's like, I just wholeheartedly disagree with that assessment.
1,000%.
The mother thing is dumb. She's an engineer.
Yeah.
And I mean, these robot dudes, they're no cheesier than any other alien we have on Star Trek. I mean, did they see the baby chicken lizard thing?
Oh, come on. That was awesome.
That was the cheesiest, but super cheesy.
Well,
I mean, we understand that they can't make robots in 1996, so there has to be a person in it. That's okay. We've seen way worse on television.
I'm going to totally defend the robots. I thought the robots really worked well as...
I agree.
They appeared to be simply constructed functional units.
Mm-hmm.
These are designed for war. They're designed for fighting, as we find out. Why are you going to give them humanoid features, eyebrows, however the race actually looked, if they're effectively disposable? I thought it gave a great sense of what these things were designed for. And on top of that, I think it added to their sort of sinister nature, that they didn't have features.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That did make them more sinister.
And they were very much, just this sort of plain piece of metal that gave you no indication of what its emotions were or what it was thinking.
Agreed.
And I think that actually worked really well.
I mean, I don't want to rile everybody up, but all of Star Trek is pretty cheesy. And that's okay. It's just part of it.
Oh, remember the race early on in Deep Space Nine with like the boxes on their head?
Oh my God, that's right. The ones with the boxes. Oh
yeah.
God. You don't think the Pakleds were cheesy?
Yeah.
The Ferengi, the first, super cheesy?
I think people need to just take it as it comes with these things. And I think it worked fine.
I think it worked fine, yeah. Then maybe the only other thing I'll mention is I was definitely still wondering if having robot number 1 watch and maybe be recording what B'Elanna was doing might be enough for them to build new units anyway.
Oh.
She told them, or she told him what the problem was.
And he was a maintenance droid.
Yeah. So are we supposed to believe that they can't take that information and continue on?
Well, maybe that, again, could be the blind spot that they have programmed in.
Maybe.
That they have this hard coding that they can't build power units.
Yeah.
Or they can't build them correctly.
They made the point of having the robot say, I don't have your improvisational capabilities.
Yeah.
So I think that was a meaningful part of it.
Oh, good point. Good point.
And I think we're supposed to believe they can't create something, or maybe they can't build on top of something. They can only repeat it exactly.
Yeah.
But what she did was make something that could have been used to generate more, right? So she built the thing that they could have copied exactly, but somehow they're not going to be able to do it because she killed the one. I don't know. I'm suspicious it's still a danger.
Right.
Like she should have taken the robot back with her or something and then killed it.
Well, maybe when she stabbed it, it actually destroyed or fused all the electronics.
Yeah.
So
okay. Oh, okay. But again, unless he recorded it. But okay.
You probably would want the robot to record everything, every step.
I do think it's possible with a lot of these Voyager episodes that after they leave, some really bad stuff happens. This is a good example of where something really bad may have happened.
Oh, man. This could be the thing about Voyager's reputation.
Yeah. They're leaving behind death and destruction.
Ran into these robots, and then the next thing, there's this robot army of 9,999.
Yeah, because they can't make 10,000.
Yeah, with the 10,000th one killing them.
Okay.
It's a robot mass murder.
It's a robot apocalypse. Well, if I move on to women in the future, I don't think there's anything really to say. Although all the robots had male voices, whatever. In Janeway's Leadership Corner, I thought that Janeway was really quite brilliant in her speech at why B'Elanna couldn't do what she wanted to do. Like, B'Elanna just came in excited and ready to do a thing without thinking it through. And Janeway, listened to her. She told her she admired her passion for doing what she wanted to do, but the decision was made.
Yeah.
I just thought that was really good. I thought that was a good moment of leadership where she had to have a tough conversation. She had to stand her ground. She probably knew from the beginning what she was going to say, but she still let B'Elanna say her piece. And I just thought that was quite good.
Absolutely agree, and brilliantly performed by Kate Mulgrew. It really works well as a scene. And I'm going to go out on a limb and say, I think this is the best explanation and best justification for the Prime Directive in Trek to date.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. And then, of course, there was on the opposite side, Chakotay just being a crappy leader to Paris when he's like, oh, well, let us do something, Tom. I don't know. That guy. I can't stand that guy.
Right, said maybe his point is to be the heel of the show.
Well, it's working. We should bring anybody else back to Prodigy but him. Why didn't we look for Harry? That would have been awesome.
Yes, especially as in, what's it called, Twisted, where Janeway says, Harry, you're the bright spot of this entire mission.
Well, exactly. And he's a great engineer, and she loves engineering. I mean, it would have made more sense if she had stayed connected with Harry than this dumbass Chakotay.
Right.
Aye. Let's go on to rating. Thumbs up, thumbs down, or neutral. What is your rating?
Absolute thumbs up. Really enjoyed this episode. I thought it worked so well. I don't think the robots are cheesy. I think the storyline's good. I think the acting in this episode's great. I love it when B'Elanna realizes what she's done. That's priceless. I love your take about the black and white at the beginning, showing how these robots think. I didn't notice that. And now, in retrospect, it makes so much sense.
Well, I didn't either until we started talking about it.
Yeah.
It just sort of came to me.
So, in summary, a wonderfully rewatchable episode. Absolute thumbs up.
I didn't remember this episode at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's great.
Yeah.
Honestly, I don't know what people are complaining about with the robots being cheesy or whatever people didn't like about it. I don't get it. I thought this was great. I really liked it.
Like I said, the simplicity of the robots, I think, adds to their sinister nature and their behavior.
I think my only real criticism is maybe that last conversation where I think we leaned a little bit too much, just like you said, into the emotions. where we could have had a really interesting conversation there, but we didn't. But, I mean, that's fine. I still think it was a great episode. Right. So, yeah, thumbs up.
That's great. This is good Voyager.
Yeah, it's good Trek. Well, that wraps up Season 2, Episode 13. Come back next time for Episode 14. In the meantime, if you'd like to send us your own overanalysis of this or any episode, or if you just want to say something nice, you can email us at ReBingeIT@gmail.com, or you can hit us up on the socials, Instagram, Threads, YouTube, all at ReBingeIT. You can connect with us on the Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/Star Trek TTM podcasts.
Thanks for joining us on the ReBinge Star Trek Voyager podcast.
That's it for me.
And that's it from me.